Dungeon Meshi is about these four goofballs cooking food inside a dungeon. Or at least that's what everyone said when the show had first started airing. Thousands of innocent viewers such as myself were smooth talked into watching this funny looking anime only for it to completely subvert all of our expectations and in the process become one of the most fun, intense and interesting shows to have come out so far this entire year. The anime follows our party of main characters Laios, Chilchak, Marcel and Senshi as they have embarked on a rescue mission to save Laios' sister Fallen, who sacrificed herself to teleport the rest of her party back to safety during an epic boss battle against an incredibly well animated 2D red dragon which had gone horribly wrong for our main characters. In hopes of retrieving Fallen before it's too late, Laios and friends immediately venture back down in the dungeon. But as much as they wish to hurry up and snatch Fallen back from the dragon's mouth, their party is currently down on both their luck and money to buy some food. And in order to survive the horrors lurking at every corner of the dungeon, you need them both equally. So with no other choice in sight, they are practically forced to use Laios' extensive knowledge of monsters and Senshi's insane cooking skills to take care of the money and food problem by cooking up and eating every single monster they find as they look for Fallen in the depths of the dungeon. And this is also where the real fun begins. Because in this dungeon where even the most perfectly balanced out or filthy rich parties can get wiped out in an instant, our rather small party of dumb adventurers are somehow the most successful bunch when it comes to hunting down monsters, and they do so by finding the most unorthodox ways of dealing with them that makes every encounter with one feel special. It doesn't matter who or what it is they are up against because more often than not, they will end up finding some clever but mostly absurd solutions of dealing with each and every single one of them. What's that? You need to get from one floor to the next but some dangerous tentacle monsters are blocking your path? No problem. Just make yourself a suit out of the invincible frog skin that you killed earlier and walk right through them without any issues. How do you even think of stuff like that? But it's not their creatively stupid ways of dealing with monsters that keeps me waiting for every episode. It is instead their friendship that I look forward to the most. It's so refreshing to see a ragtag team of friends just messing around, having fun and occasionally if needed, taking care of each other instead of getting into petty fights or stupid relationships. It's entertaining as fuck to see Marcel having the most insane reaction to most things Laios does, Chilchak losing his mind over Senshi's stubbornness, who himself treats Chilchak like a little kid, and at one point, he sits Chilchak down to have the grown-up talk, which is probably among my favorite bits from the entire anime. And then there's Laios, who just really loves monsters and wants nothing more than to taste every single one of them, which actually makes him a perfect protagonist to explore a place as rich and diverse as the dungeon. It's very obvious that the author Ryoko put an unnecessary amount of effort into the intricacies of the biological system of the dungeon and the roles played by the different people in the story. Kabru and his party members are all pretty well equipped and coordinated group of adventurers capable of taking down some tough monsters on their own, and yet they get easily taken out by a bunch of coins, which makes you think that they are only here to serve as an example of how terrifying the dungeon can be even for those fully prepared to fight in it. The second time you find them a couple episodes later, they are once again laying dead on the water because some ugly looking fishes got to them. And now you're like, surely these idiots are just here to become laughingstock and nothing more than that. But by the third time, they end up becoming real genuine people who have a much more significant part to play in the story than any of us could have predicted from those first few instances. And this interaction in particular solidified something for me. There are almost no wasted or overlooked characters in this entire anime. It does a great job at expanding upon almost everyone and everything that we come across on our way without ever losing track of the main objective. For example, when Laios and others have been teleported to safety back in the first episode, we learned that a couple of members just left the party instead of going with them to save Fallen. In any other anime, you would expect these people to be one-dimensional evil characters who have no compassion towards their own friends. But since this is Dungeon Meshi, those characters not only come back into the plot in a good way, but they also make some fairly reasonable points about why they left the party, and a part of them does feel guilty over it as well. There is so much characterization to be found in the different people and races of this anime, through especially their design and on-screen presence alone. For instance, the elves possess an aura and authority that mirrors their age and wisdom. The demi-humans actually look like a mix between two species and not just a marketable plushie. The orcs, for the first time ever, do not look racist, and the regular old humans are also kinda cool, I guess. The same goes for the half-orcs, the eastern ninjas, the dogs, and the dwarves whose distinctions, relations, and history with each other gives a sense of legitimacy to the fiction setting they inhabit. For a studio that only ever does original animes, Trigger has done an incredible job at adapting this manga title that is unlike anything they have worked on before. With some sweeping uncut action sequences, some elaborate structures for world building's sake, some gorgeous looking food that you'll never get to experience in real life, and some seriously underrated soundtrack that is on par with, if not at times better than Freeren's OST, Trigger has taken this already beloved manga title and transformed it into a work that stands on its own merits. But even then, a lot of people dismissed Dungeon Meshi initially by calling it a repetitive show about Marcel suffering every single episode and comparing it to a slice of life anime more than an adventure fantasy one, which I personally don't mind at all, but I think calling this show repetitive is absolutely unfair, because if you'll actually take notice, there are almost no two monsters who are defeated the exact same way, and there are definitely no two recipes that are cooked the same way either. Here's a list of just some of the ridiculous concoctions and the methods in which they were crafted. They use traps that are meant to kill people as fuel to make some deep fried dishes. They use golems made out of mud and magic as a walking farmland for crops and vegetables. They cooked up and ate actual living armor. Was I expecting them to use a bunch of jewelry to fend off ghosts and make ice cream in the process? They cooked water and somehow made it feel like an exciting adventure to watch. What more do you want me to say? Everything about Dungeon Meshi as a fantasy story is so creative and extra than what it needs to be. And yet, through all the unfiltered chaos happening all around them, they still make plenty of progress towards their actual goal, which turns the so-called repetitive madness into an actual adventure. But hey, I get it. Seeing Marcel go through the 5 stages of grief every time she has to try out a new monster recipe can be a bit boring for some viewers who are used to the high-octane action of other isekai fantasy series. But those people need to understand something about this anime that I myself understood, especially after watching episode 11. Dungeon Meshi was never a show about cooking, but instead, it was always an anime about eating. The moment you realize that the rule of the dungeon is to eat or be eaten, your whole perspective of this anime shifts and you find yourself at the edge of your seat waiting for the next episode to come out, for that next big moment to happen. Because as easygoing and fun the majority of this anime is, I think Dungeon Meshi's greatest strength lies in its ability to go from a wholesome and relaxing show to a what the fuck just happened kind of show in a matter of a few scenes. While the second half has kept the comedic charm and energy we saw in the first half, things have been getting wilder and a whole lot more terrifying than I could have ever expected going into this anime. And that has become especially true after seeing how serious things got in the Senshi episode. I'm kind of terrified of where this anime can possibly be headed, but that's part of what Dungeon Meshi has going for it right now. The perfect blend of comedy and serious stuff you find in this anime is something most shows can only dream of achieving without falling down tropes and cliches. Like there can be the most uncomfortable and stressful conversation taking place on screen about a particular character being an extremely evil, heartless and repulsive individual, and then you pan the camera to said character and they look like this. I love this anime. If you look past all the fun times and the memeable faces, you'll find that there is an actual meaningful story being told here. One that is not just about cooking or eating or being eaten for that matter, because at least for me, it is something a little more than that, and I think I might know what that is. In a place as terrifying as the dungeon, where monsters pour out of every nook and cranny who overpower, deceive and devour those unprepared, a powerful mad magician terrorizes those who meddle with the place, and the whispers of an old ruined kingdom echo out to the surface, there is a feeling of reassurance in the simple knowledge that no matter how tough some days may be in there, these idiots will gather around, set aside their differences if there are any, and have all kinds of meaningless conversations like real friends do over some delicious food in that dungeon. I still can't believe the cook water. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.